All right, let's go ahead and cut through the crap. Let's talk about this. This is going to be a little bit of a long slog, but I am asking you to stick with me and listen to the entire video because I think there's a valuable lesson that can be learned by the attitude of individuals out there who responded positively to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I was talking with a coworker of mine recently, and his thought process was, well, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. This person was preaching hatred and anger and violence, and so it was perfectly understandable that this individual went out and did what he did. I'd like to offer 3 stories that could possibly show that might be a tad bit short-sighted. Story number 1 is that of John Newton, composer of the song Amazing Grace. He was a captain in the slave trade for years, and following an encounter in which he intensely prayed during a particularly violent storm off the coast of Ireland, he had a religious conversion and began to really look at the world through God's eyes. As he continued to read the Bible, it changed his mind and his concept, and he began to pen various works enumerating to the people the conditions of the slave trade, the realities of these slave ships. And it had a long-term effect when he joined forces with a man by the name of William Wilberforce, who headed the abolitionist movement. And through their efforts, they were able to get enough people on their side to eventually abolish the slave trade. Keep in mind, as far as the conservatives were concerned in Parliament, this was an extremely radical concept and one that they opposed vehemently until the very end. Story number 2 is that of Malcolm X, a political activist and speaker who spoke out against what he perceived as white supremacy, racial injustice in the United States during the 60s, and various other injustices that he felt violated the natural order of law and the application of law. And he was of the Islamic faith. Now, one of the things with the Islamic faith is that once during your lifetime, you're asked to take a Hajj, a journey to Mecca, where other Muslims will get together and pray and worship and then gather in solidarity. And during this Hajj, he experienced a transformation. When he finally did take his Hajj in 1964, Malcolm saw that there were individuals of a multiplicity of different racial backgrounds, white, black, every single demographic that you can think of, and different cultural experiences, different historical backgrounds, all gathered together under a singular banner with a singular focus, a single mindset, and completely absent, largely, was the abrasiveness and the angst that he'd become accustomed to. And it affected him so much that he came back to the States and penned a letter indicating that he was changing some of his concepts of what was possible, rather than being the constant division, that there was a possibility for people to come together. Less than a year later, in 1965, he was taken out. Now, there's different theories about who did the shooting. 3 people of his own Islamic background were convicted, but that's come under challenge recently. We don't exactly know who took him out. But one thing that we do heavily suppose is that his changing worldview probably contributed to his death. And the last story I will use is that of Bobby Fischer and Spassky. If you'll go back to Cold War chess history, you're going to find that there was a propaganda game played between chess grandmaster Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. And this culminated in a Fischer win, and the United States government celebrated, saying this is just another proof that the United States system is so much better than the Soviet system. But if you go and watch the tape following their game, while all these individuals are celebrating over their propaganda win, Spassky pulls out a calculator and a notebook, and he begins to talk with Fischer, and the two of them begin to study the board. How did he win? How can he improve? How can he, in his craft, forge better tactics to win in the future? How does any of this have to do with Charlie? I would argue that it's fundamental. Each of these stories indicates an area where a person went through personal growth, where a person was faced with a challenge. And through that challenge, they either changed their mindset, joined a force to go against something that they hated and despised, or allowed them to sit down there and study their own tactics, study what it was that made them who they are and how they can make it better. But if somebody takes that concept out, takes that individual out, you remove all possibility of personal growth and improvement of your system or your message. Now, it's unlikely that Charlie Kirk would ever become a raving liberal, but it is possible through his own life experience that he might have adapted a concept that he had, that he might have grown to have a different opinion in his 40s or in his 50s than he had in his 20s or his 30s. That would be the path of John Newton. It also would be the path of Malcolm X, where he could actually sit down and say, you know what, I believed this back in the end, but I had this experience, and here's why I've transformed a little bit to the left. But that's not what's going to happen now, because individuals couldn't stand his words at the present moment. The other thing that is so sorely lost is the possibility the left could have its own Charlie Kirk. Remember, when Spassky and Fischer had their game, they were regarded as one of the two greatest chess grandmasters of all time. And Spassky's reaction is, why did I lose? How can I learn? It's fully possible the left could have had its own individual person step up and, if not beat Kirk, challenge him to a decent debate, and then sit down, listen to the points, and try to hone their message. Where did I fall short? What can I do better? How can I reach more people and draw them to my side? And all of that was taken out by a moment of intolerance and violence. With this action, my fear is a segment of the American populace will become more and more hardened, less open to hearing individuals' points of view and concepts, acting through anger rather than reason. And we might lose not only Charlie, but other individuals that might grow, that might learn, that might adapt their message. And that opportunity has been lost forever and for all time. The death of Kirk is a tragedy. His life ended in a moment of hatred and intolerance, the use of violence to end for all time 1,000,000 positive possible outcomes, and the possibility of an individual left rising up and being able to challenge, possibly even defeat Kirk in open debate. Now that that one voice has been silenced, I urge each and every one of us to step forward and give rise to 100 more. I'll talk to you next time when we talk about another thing I find interesting. I'm out.